All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about someone really special today, Ramana Maharshi. He was one of modern India's most incredible sages. And his message, well, it's so simple, so profound, that it's still inspiring people all over the world. It all really starts with a question that I think every single one of us asks at some point. Ramana put it perfectly. He said that every living being just wants to be happy, right? Always happy with no misery. We all have this deep, deep love for ourselves. So the big question is, where does that real, lasting happiness actually come from? And here's what makes this story so wild. The answer didn't come from some wise old master who'd been meditating in a cave for 50 years. Nope, it came to a totally ordinary schoolboy. And it wasn't a slow process, it was a flash, a single moment that changed everything for him. Yeah, before the world knew him as this great sage, he was just a kid named Venkataraman Iyer. He was born in this tiny village in southern India back in 1879, and honestly, if you looked at his childhood, you would have had no clue, absolutely no idea what was about to happen. So you can see here, he's just living a normal life, and then bam, 1896. That's the year everything shifts, the year of his profound awakening. And get this, he was only 16, just a teenager. This wasn't something he'd been working towards for years. It wasn't the result of some long, disciplined practice. It was just spontaneous, a radical, complete shift in his mind happening at this incredibly young age. So what happened? Well, he had what he later called a death experience. He was suddenly gripped by this intense fear of dying. But instead of fighting it, he just lay down and let it happen. And in that moment, instead of finding death, he found something else entirely. He described it as this current, or this force, a presence that was totally aware and couldn't die. And he realized that was his real self. From then on, he felt like it was this current living through him, not his own personal me. It's just incredible when you think about it, the speed of it all. We're talking a matter of minutes. The schoolboy, Venkataraman, he was essentially gone, replaced by this presence that was always constantly aware of its own immortal nature, a total transformation. After that, everything changed. He felt this pull. It was irresistible, like a magnet, drawing him away from his family, his home, everything he knew. And it pulled him to this sacred hill called Arunachala. And once he got there, that was it. He never left. For the next 54 years, that mountain was his home. So you might be wondering, what did he teach? Well, it all grew out of that one powerful experience. It wasn't some complicated philosophy or a list of do's and don'ts. It was much simpler. It was an invitation, really. An invitation to ask yourself one single powerful question. Who am I? This practice has a name. It's called Atma Vichara, which basically means self-inquiry. And the idea behind it is, well, it's simple, but it's totally revolutionary. See, instead of getting tangled up in all the thoughts racing through our minds, you just turn your attention around. You go looking for the source of the very first thought, that little thought of I. Okay, so how do you actually do it? It's really direct. Let's say a thought pops into your head. Any thought. You just ask yourself, who is having this thought? And the answer, of course, is me, right? But then you ask the real question. Who am I? The point isn't to think of an answer with your brain. The point is to just focus on that feeling of I and trace it back to where it comes from, back to the silence. And the story of how his most famous teaching got written down is pretty cool. See, Ramana wasn't trying to be an author. He didn't set out to write a book. But back in 1902, this guy shows up with all these questions. The thing is, Ramana was in a period of silence at the time. So what did he do? He just wrote the answers down for the man. And those notes, just written on the spot to help this one person, they became his most famous work, Who Am I? Now this brings us to something really important about why so many people, especially from the West, were drawn to him. Ramana's authority, it wasn't the traditional kind. He wasn't part of some ancient lineage of gurus, and he didn't come from a famous monastery.
No, his authority came from one place, and one place only, his own direct experience. There's a great story where a scholar asked him if his teachings were based on the ancient sage Sankara, and Ramana basically said, look, I'm just speaking from my own experience. It just so happens that it lines up with what he said. For him, direct experience was the source of truth, not some old book.
And that's why people didn't flock to him to hear long, complicated lectures. They came for something called darshan, which really just means being in his presence. So many people said that the most powerful teaching they ever got was just sitting in the room with him, in total silence. That was it. Of course, a message like this needs people to help share it, right? And a few key people were so important. There was Ganapati Muni, a brilliant scholar who immediately saw how special Ramana was. He's the one who gave him the name Ramana Maharshi. Then there was a poet named Sri Muruganar, who was basically his shadow, writing down thousands of his teachings. And later on, people from the West, like Arthur Osborne, helped get the word out even further. But the real turning point, when his message went global, was in the 1930s. This British writer, Paul Brunton, came to visit and wrote about it in his book, A Search in Secret India. That book became a huge bestseller, and it was like the floodgates open. Suddenly, all these seekers from the West started making the journey to Arunachala. And just look at the kind of people who were drawn to his teachings. It was an incredibly diverse group. You've got the famous psychologist Carl Jung. You've got a Christian monk, Thomas Merton. Even the novelist Somerset Maugham. I mean, his message just cut through all the labels. Culture, religion, you name it.
You know, Carl Jung summed it up pretty well. After looking into Ramana's teachings, he just said he was genuine and something quite phenomenal. In other words, this wasn't just some guru putting on a show. To a mind like Jung's, Ramana was the real deal.
And his legacy isn't just in books. It's a physical place. The ashram, Sri Ramanashramam. It wasn't some grand project. It just sort of grew up organically around him at the base of that mountain. And today, it's still there. Still a thriving center for people from all over the world who want to dive into his teachings. When he was nearing the end of his life, his body was failing and his followers were, of course, heartbroken. But he said something to them that just perfectly captured his entire life's teaching. He told them, "They say that I am dying, but I am not going away. Where could I go? I am here." You see, for him, he wasn't the body. He was that same deathless presence he discovered all those years ago as a boy. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that Ramana's message is incredibly liberating. All that stuff we're looking for, happiness, peace, freedom, it's not something you have to go out and get. It's not something you achieve. It's already here. It's your natural state. It's who you are. And that kind of leaves us with one big question to think about, doesn't it? What if the greatest adventure, the only journey that truly matters, is the one inward?